Hi everyone, welcome back to another Simple Planes video. In this video, I'm just going to show you all the progress I've been making on the SWL-120. So, let's get started. Since my last video, I haven't just worked on, say, the livery or some certain project. I've actually worked on a lot of things. Like I have this livery, I have another whole new interior, which has other stuff like a crew rest area. I've made some modifications to the engines, and a lot more, so I think I'll start with the livery since that's where I left off in the last video. Now, as the idea for the whole plane is that every single aspect is insanely realistic, I also need to make some liveries. This is the Snake Air livery. This is a fictional livery. I guess it would come from the same, world as Snake Wonderland, which is what SWL means. Now, I actually didn't design this livery. This was designed by someone called Republic of Coast Planes. The way I made this livery is not using, say, fuselage slicing or say, labels. The entire livery was 3D modeled outside of the game. So this, like the fuselage part of it is one part, and everything else is also one part. So say for the rudder, I have one part for that. Anything else that the livery happens to cross over. And yes, it also includes this tiny little bit that's in the door. That's also its own part. And same for the other side, even this little door here. And this is the livery as it is in my 3D modeling software. Not really much to say here. It's pretty simple. The way I did this is I exported the fuselage itself, and then I added that to the software, and then I modeled around it. The fuselage is not in this one because this is the final version for I was about to export it and then put it in Simple Planes, but if I go back a couple versions, to this version, this is an early version, you can see how I did it. I just go the rest of it. I just use my reference image, or I just make up whatever I want, and then I just go around the fuselage, and then just draw lines on it. It's not really good, but that's just because I'm showing it quickly. Then for the text, the way I did the text is I went to Blender, because, well, I can do it in this software as well, but this was a specific font for this text, so I had to go to Blender for that. Then I just go to some 3D text, and then I just kind of like trace it onto the fuselage. Well, actually I don't trace it. What I do is I make the text like more like a 2D shape, and then I'm not sure how well this is going to work this quickly here, but I draw a line, and then I can select the most lower parts of the line. It's not going to be pretty, but that's because I'm showing it briefly. Then I just say rotate it like that. You can see some other stuff went with it, but that's just I didn't select everything. This is how I curve the text to match the fuselage. That's about it for this livery. I do have some other planned liveries, some being real ones and some being fictional ones, but I don't think I'll start working on them for another couple months. The other thing I said I was going to work on in my last video is the landing gear override switch. It's pretty much the switch that if the hydraulics fails completely, you can click that switch and the landing gear can then be extended manually. Well, not manually, but it's just an alternative method of extending the landing gear. If we have a look at the cockpit, just turn on the cockpit first. I've made a few modifications here, just kind of went ahead and redid the entire center panel. This is that landing gear override switch. I added a few other things here as well. We have the lever, which was always there. And then if I just turn on some hydraulics by starting the APU. I think at some point I also made this APU information panel. At some point. Just a bunch of basic information about the APU. I tried to make this realistic based on real life, but I couldn't find much information on APUs, so I just made it seem more realistic. That's all there is to it. These are all just simple functions based off the actual APU core. And now with the APU started, we can now look at this landing gear panel. After turn on the hydraulics, that is, of course. With the hydraulics actually on, the system ready light will now light up, indicating the landing gear system is ready. Down here we also have the alternate active light and the extension switch. Now this doesn't actually do anything because we already have a method of extending or retracting the landing gear. But if I say turn off hydraulics and turn the switch on, the alternate active light is now on and the system is now also ready. And of course the safety cover, you can open that too, and after some time it will shut by itself. A little bit of extra realism, same with all the other switch covers here. And while we're in the cockpit, I'm also going to show you more closely this new center panel. The RMCs, or radio management computers, have always been here, but these have also been modified slightly, and I also heavily improved the back-end code. I removed 400 variables, I think, something like that. Now it's like, I don't know, 50 variables, which may seem like a lot, but it's really not that much compared to the other stuff on this plane. Flight manager computers in the more simplified version now, they aren't more simplified, but the variables are improved. Those are just 500 variables for the whole thing. And this, of course, is all fully functional. Well, the radios, you can click stuff, but they don't do anything because Simple Planes does not have radios, of course. These don't actually do anything at all, they're just there so you can click them. This is also based completely on real life, so these are all actual switches. I know what they all do. So this one in real life, what that would do, I actually do not know what it does because it's been a little while since I made this panel. I know this one changes the microphone input from the microphone on the pilot's headset to the one in the oxygen mask. Then, yeah, I don't know what these two do, the side ones, but they do something. I'll probably put something there in editing. Same with this one, but they're all there in real life, so they all do something. And you can also just change the microphone, so this is similar to real life in certain planes, but I think what it does, or at least what it will do in real life, it changes which of the frequencies, so low high frequency and high frequency of the, I guess, really 6 radios. It decides which of these you're actually broadcasting on. Then these are all volumes. And now in real life you can twist them, but in mine, because this is the switch I have access to, it just can switch between off and medium volume. So it's not that much, but you can still click them at least. The ACP stands for Audio Control Panel. So you have the captain's one, the cockpit speaker one, which has a few less switches because there's no microphone attached to that one, and then the first officer's one. Then you have your 2 trims. I thought I should make this work, but I couldn't be bothered to for now, so they're not very useful. Then you have the intercom phone. Then you have some controls for the cabin, so you have the seatbelts and no smoking. I call it smoking, I don't know why, but it's no smoking. Then you have your lights. Now currently, I actually have no interior in this file. I'll show you that in a sec. But when I add that back in, these will control those lights. And of course, since this plane is highly realistic, of course I have sound effects for this. And this is another, I guess, not useless switch, because in real life it does something, but in this plane it's useless, just there for realism. That is the evacuation command switch, with the safety cover of course. Now for the radio manager computer, this is, functionally it's exactly like the old one, just with a few less radios in it, but on the back I changed a whole lot of code. This is quite simple to use pretty much. You input some sort of frequency in the transponder, and you can switch between transponder modes, and these all do have a function in real life. And then you just have the ident button. What this does is it outputs a signal of some sort for 18 seconds. I think I may have shortened it. And then on the air traffic controller screen they can see that this particular code has been inputted and idented. Now these are the 3 kinds of radios: very high frequency, and then navigation. This is used for the ILS. I just call it nav here. This is the frequency that's used most often for communication. You can just simply input some sort of frequency in here. It works as you'd expect. You have to put it in standby first. You can't just put it directly in active, and all it does is to swap frequencies. So I can put this one in active, and then put this one in standby. Entry frequency is pretty straightforward. You just enter numbers, and then if you want to skip to typing decimals, you just press the decimal key and it changes it over. Pretty simple. Now high frequency, that's used for more long range communication, so say when you're crossing the ocean. Now in real planes you actually would have maybe 2 radios or even just 1, but in my plane, because I couldn't be bothered to make it less than 3, you have 3. And it's the ILS. There's no standby, you just have active. You just then put in frequency, and then put it in. The right side is the exact same, it can have its own screen, but they write to the same storage variables. That's about it for the new center panel. This hasn't changed much, I don't think. Now I'll get to this in a sec, but in the setup page where you used to be able to, well, not used to, but where you can enter, what am I saying? In the setup page where you can enable or disable support for several mod plugins and change the platform, so this just controls waypoints, I've decided that these 3 mod plugin airports are not enough. So I decided to add all mod plugin airports, at least ones that add stuff to the main map, not like custom mod maps, because I don't have infinite time. But that's what I'm going to be doing. I've already started working on some of the stuff for this. I just haven't got around to changing the page here, but when I've fully changed it, you can have some more pages for all the mod airports. What else is new? I don't think anything else up here is new. Now the other thing that I have also done in the cockpit is the autopilot. It's not fully finished. This panel here, the waypoint stuff, is useless, at least for now. But what I have done is made a basic altitude, heading, and speed held autopilot. I guess it's not that basic for simple planes, but I consider it basic compared to what I'm going to do in the future. Now let's just start up some engines, and also I think this is new since my last video. I also have sound effects now. In the engines there's 3, someone trust me, there's 3 tone generator blocks, one for the, I guess, bass on the air spool up. This engine is based off the G90 engine, used in the 777. Let's get this plane to prep for start actually. So we have some hydraulics on. Let's turn on some lights. Put on some duct pressure for one, we can start the engines now. I think everything else is good to go, I guess. And we can start the engine. If you listen, you can hear that new sound effect. Then the more apparent sound effect, turn on fuel first, and this is the fuel introduction sound. There. Should probably have a parking brake set too. Yeah, I also need to make checklists so I don't know what to actually click so I don't forget stuff, like the parking brake. And I can go ahead and start the second engine. And the third sound effect in the engines, when I go to absolute full throttle, is the sawtooth sound effect. Now it sounds a bit loud in the cockpit because I haven't fixed the variable that decides if we're in first person or not to change the sound, but if I compare them to the outside sound, it sounds about right, relative to the volume of the engine. Now the basic autopilot is very straightforward. You just turn on the master and then you activate whichever one you actually want to use. So I'm just going to go heading, altitude, heading, then speed. But to use speed, this doesn't work right now. You also need to arm both auto throttles. I'm not entirely sure how this works in real life, but I know this is there, so I just wanted to add it for more realism. You also need both engines to be on to use it. Now I think in real life it actually could work with one engine, but I cannot be bothered trying to code it to work with one engine, just because it just requires more testing, like refining and stuff, so I just made it work with 2. But with both engines on and functional, then you can just turn it on. And what it does is it just overrides the throttle input, so this doesn't do anything. Neither does actually moving the throttle. It overrides the throttle and sets its own value. Now adjusting these is also very simple. You can't really turn the dial because it's not actually a dial or a knob. This is actually a magnet on a rotator, but hidden behind them are actually buttons that when clicked change the value. In real life these would be stacked, so you'd have like a bigger adjust then a smaller adjust on top of that, but since they'll be very annoying to impossible to, I guess, not code, I can use it easily, but just to use it in simple planes, I just made them separate. And also for stuff like heading, you just turn it really fast, but since you have to individually click for each increment, I decided to also add one that does it in tens. Same for the other stuff, which is the altitude and the speed. Stuff that isn't that much to adjust, I just left the one knob. Now I'm going to make a whole separate video on how I made the autopilot and how you can make your own, so I won't go into the specifics of how all this works. But this is the autopilot, and it does what it does. It's an autopilot. One thing that I'm also going to fix is how it doesn't perfectly match the speed. It was working before, but I must have changed some small thing and that obviously changed it. But I have a simple fix, and it's not just setting it higher than you want it to be. It's making this setting higher than what you want it to be just part of the code. I'll do that later. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is the interior. This is currently the old interior. Even though this is pretty good, like you have a full interior, you have reasonably detailed seats, you have overhead panels, seatbelt signs, and those smoking signs that actually work. All kind of other cool stuff. You have the outlines of overhead bins, phone numbers, and you have the modeled interior, so there's like all galley stuff and bathrooms and things. I don't really think this is detailed enough. Yep, you heard me right, this is not detailed enough for my plane. So I went ahead and remade it. One of the reasons being that even though the other interior is, as I said, pretty high quality, it just looks, the whole thing just looks weird in virtual reality. So I wanted to remake that and fix those issues. And this here is what I made. This is not the final version yet, but this is what I made. And it looks pretty good. You have, I guess higher middle section ceiling. You have overhead bins. And I know these aren't where they're supposed to be. I made a version where they were where they're supposed to be, but the mod I have installed right now doesn't have them at the right model, but that's fine, so ignore them. Let's get rid of them for now. This is that second version. Some of the new changes are, I don't know, overhead bins that you can open individually that have a full inside model and some other cool details. The overhead panels are the same, except I also made some versions that do not have passenger sign mount, this section here, because having one for every single row looks unrealistic. And it also has completely brand new seats. Now these are not made by me, those are actually modeled completely in Blender by someone called MVC. And I think they're very high quality. And actually these ones aren't actually the final model. We're also going to have seat belts on them, and some other small details. As if this isn't detailed enough. Then going to business class. Not these guys, we have these new not like that. This is also, because what I'm showing you is with an older version of the mod where some stuff isn't finished. But these are the business class seats. They don't have the color set up yet. But they're not just the other seats but wide. They're all their own separate model. Reasonably high level of detail. I have this interior, but this isn't even the final interior. It looks great, and if I go into the level and go into economy class, it also looks great. The bins all open. Now currently they just set the throttle, but that's because I haven't set the buttons up yet. But in the final version, we're all going to be able to be opened individually with a button next to each bin. Every single bin. It's not that many parts though, just I don't know, 100 or something. This was all great. Except I went into virtual reality, and the whole thing was off. For reference, even though these look great, you could barely fit, say, a small handbag in these overhead bins, the middle ones, which is nothing compared to what can actually be fit into them on, say, a 787 Dreamliner, which is the plane that I was on recently and I had a look around. So, even though I spent probably 2 weeks in this interior, I decided to just scrap the whole thing. And also, in the process of making the interior, I also figured out that I needed to scale the entire plane up by 1.2, because it was just a tiny bit too small, and that fixed a lot of the scaling issues I was seeing in virtual reality. So everything looked the right scale now. So the seats are all the right scale, but the whole overhead ceiling, I just didn't like it. So even though this is all pretty cool and all, I even got to the point of making the overhead bins into models. These are all one part per bin, mod parts, because it'll be 2,000 parts plus to add them all in vanilla simple planes. I just made one and then modded it. So it had this interior, and I just didn't like it, so I scrapped that. And this interior here, this is the actual current interior. Ignore the windows here, they're just from other stuff I'm working on. And also something I just forgot to mention, in an older version, say all this stuff, say latches, doors and things, they were all their own mod parts, and then I had control bases to move them, but now I've actually learned scripting, so they're all one part, they just have a script that moves them. That's the same for some other parts, for example the engines, the fan blades and stuff, that's all one part now. I was able to save over 100 parts by just scripting some things. Most of that was in the engine reverse thrust vanes, because each vane was one part, times 24 sides, times 2 engines, times 1 part plus a rotator, so that's a lot. Just have a look around. This is based off the 787 interior, mainly. It's not the 787 interior, but it's really heavily based off it. Now I haven't got around to making seatbelt signs yet, but everything else is as you would expect. Overhead bins, they're still on the vanilla simple planes versions, I haven't modded these yet. See, that's why you also hear the rotator sounds. But this is the size and like movement of them. And you can see they're a lot bigger relative to, say, the seats or the overhead ceiling in general. And even then, they just feel like a tiny bit smaller than the 787's ones, but they're pretty good, I'd say, for simple planes at least. The other thing I need to add for here is row numbers. For one, I'm going to put them on the seats, because there's no real good spot to put them over in the overhead bins. I also probably might add a textured carpet, like texture just for the floor, just a small thing. And again, the business class cabin, it's still not finished, but I've made some progress. I also need to add materials for all the seats, but actually that's not me, that's NBC, he'll do that at some point in the future. And here you can see the seat belts, kind of here. So that'll be the same thing on the economy seats. And the other thing for the interior in general that I'm going to do is, you know how these bathrooms are just shut doors with nothing inside them? I'm going to make it so for every single bathroom you can open the door and there'll be an actual interior in here, because I don't want a single space that's not modeled, since I'm putting all this effort in. And the other thing that's on planes is the crew rest area, which is where the flight attendants and pilots go to sleep when they're not on duty. That means that I had to model one. Now I'll just show you this in a separate file because I split them, but this is my crew rest area. In the 787 and similar planes, there's actually two. There's one for the pilots, called the pilot rest area, and there's one for the flight attendants, which is called the crew rest area. Generally, the crew rest area for like 777, 787, and similar is in the back, and the pilot rest area is in the front on top. Mine is similar to that, so you have some stairs here. I can get the right view. Then lead up into the rest area itself. We have a few beds, and then obviously some details like curtains. Yep, that's individual curtain pieces. I'm not sure what they're actually called, but yeah, I have fully modeled curtains, even bolts on the curtain boards, everything. Currently we're at over 1,000 parts. This is like nothing, this is all just one part fuselage. So 1,000 parts for this crew rest area, which isn't that much compared to the rest of the plane. At least the rest of the plane without mods. There are a total of 9 beds here. Now, I haven't done the pilot rest area yet, but it's going to go actually underneath the Ultimate Class cabin. So if I just load up the other version, it's going to go underneath the floor in either here or here. Now this bay, I might actually take this bay out completely. This bay is not actually there in real life. I put it there so I could store, say, a bunch of cameras that are attached to other things, say a pushback tug with some other vehicles, so you can have a better view of those if you're controlling them, like you spawn them as an AI plane, then just drive them around. And that's what this bay was going to be used for, but I think I can just hide the cameras somewhere else in the plane. I don't need a whole bay with them, but that's something else to work on in the future. That is about it for the new interior and some other stuff. On the fuselage, well not fuselage, but on the plane, I have some new landing gear rims. These are part of the upcoming car parts mod that me and Embassy are working on. So I figured I'd add these landing gear rims to my own wheels. Pretty simple. And the other new thing, which is actually a pretty big thing, is the new cockpit screens. In the current plane, I have this one, actually they're over here, I'll just show you in the level. In the current plane I have just some cockpit screens using labels. Well, actually, as of right now, the whole cockpit is fully vanilla, at least in the main plane. They have these labels. This is actually all vanilla. But what I'm working on, because these are very laggy and they don't like look perfect, I'm adding modded cockpit screens. This is the work in progress primary flight display, and it is fully animated just like the real thing. At least the parts I have already made. I need to add a lot more. Just jump to in the air. See how the speed tape is animated. There's an input controller for each of these digits. Each of these digits are actually just textures on a block. This is all test textures. That's just how it works. They're not models, they're just images now. Then they're all moved around. I say that looks pretty good. And the other thing I've also done, which is different to the other one, is see how the pitch indicator, whatever this is called, I think it's the artificial horizon pitch, these numbers here, they span the full width and height of the label. The ones here are actually cut off to the circle around here. This is how it is in real life. Which is also why I can make these transparent instead of opaque like here, otherwise it'll be hard to see a lot of stuff because everything would be overlapping. Now for the navigation display, the current one has just a simple heading indicator, and I'm also probably going to add some waypoints there, but that's not good enough. So on here, I haven't really worked on a mod screen for this yet, is going to be a very high detail topographical like this map of every island in the game, including all supported mod plugins. And this is going to take me a long time to make because I have to trace around images like every single vertex. I'll just show you what I mean by that. This is what I'm currently working on. I'm still on Vite ISOs, but I haven't spent that much time on this. Only like a couple days in terms of like full-time work on it. But what I mean by fully topographical map is I get an image of every height. So this is not every height, but various layers. This is 0 meters sea level 30 meters, 60, 90, 120, 150, and so on. Curling up to 900 meters. I don't think there's too many more after that. There's more than 1,000, I know that much. Then what I do is, for example here, I go zoom in a lot, and then I just trace around the image. So we'll add these lines bottom here. And the result is highly accurate outlines of whatever terrain is there at each level. Just turn on everything else. This is what I've currently outlined. Just turn it on. If I just show the faces, this is kind of what it looks like. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to make it so the higher up you go, there's a darker color. A gradient, not just some outlines. And then I'll do this for every single island in the game, including many mod plugins. And then all that will be displayed on a moving map. So not only does it move in the X and Y positions, it also rotates. And then on that map I'll add waypoints. So that's my current plans for the cockpit screens. And then for the AECAS, or Engine Information and Crew Alerting System display, that will look as it is. Although I'm going to make it a mod because this label is also pretty laggy. Otherwise it can just be replaced by just a few 3D models, or an image actually. And that is pretty much it for the update as of right now. I just thought I'd just make a video since it's been a couple months to show you just where I'm at. I think my next video will probably be that Autopilot tutorial, so I'll show you how to make an Autopilot, the basic one at least. Now by basic I still mean altitude, heading and speed hold. By complex Autopilot I mean full auto flight to waypoints and stuff based on what you input into the FMC. So you would say input, well not everything will be used, but it'll use some information here and definitely in cruise, and then obviously you'd have your flight plans. So just put in a random one. I type in waypoints here, and then they'll show up on this other screen here that I haven't made yet, and then the plane will fly to them in order. So that will be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!